We've got a month of baseball under our belts, and the Atlanta Braves are pretty much right where we thought they'd be. First place in the NL East with one of the best records in baseball. In fact, heading into the weekend, they own the best record in baseball as they get ready to show it down with the Los Angeles Dodgers. How they're doing it, though, this year is at least a little bit surprising. We're going to get into all of that on this edition of Battery Power TV. Grant McCauley alongside Chris Willis, as always. Before we get started, hit that thumbs up button, leave us a like and your comments. Make sure you subscribe to the Battery Power YouTube channel. And hit that bell right down there. You get notified every time we drop a new episode. And if you like what you've seen here, we appreciate you riding along with us. And make sure you tell a friend or three so we can keep this thing growing. Chris, the Braves are in the midst of a 9-game stretch against fellow first-place clubs. They took a series from the Guardians in somewhat dramatic fashion, dropped one to the Mariners in frustrating fashion, and now they get their old friends, the Los Angeles Dodgers. Always a must-see kind of series. It's been interesting, this road thus far for the Braves over the course of the first month. Plus, Atlanta is succeeding despite some flaws in the early going, particularly in the lineup.
Yeah, and that's surprising because I think coming into the season, once Spencer Strider went down, we were all worried about the pitching. And, here it is. It's the offense scuffling a little bit, and the pitching's been outstanding after, a little up and down start to the season. So definitely strange, but that's just a reminder of how unpredictable baseball can be. Just when you think you got everything figured out, this is what happens.
It's what Roddy Piper used to say. Just when you think you've got all the answers, I change the questions. Baseball season is very much like that. And as you look at the different phases for the Braves, whether it be the offense, the pitching, the defense, a lot of times it feels like, maybe with respect to the defense, you always want that to be good. But one or the other side sometimes has to do more of the heavy lifting. You'd assume it would be the Braves offense just based on the name value alone. And let me just tell you, the offense has done some work this year. It just hasn't looked like it did at the peak of what they were doing in 2023. It is the topic du jour. Atlanta's powerful offense, maybe not so powerful with the home run ball as they were last season. Considering the power outage from Ronald Acuna Jr., who has just one, Matt Olson and Austin Riley, throw all three of them together, Chris, they've combined for 6 home runs thus far. That is not a typo. Others in the lineup, though, have stepped up and produced, but would it surprise you to know that the Braves have scored more runs through 29 games this season than they did a year ago when they set the modern franchise record with 947? Because, Chris, that certainly got my attention.
Yeah, that is surprising. I looked yesterday, and I think they're ranked 19th in the majors in homers right now, which was unbelievable to me just watching. But, they've gone, I think, 5 games now without a homer. I know they didn't homer in the series in Seattle. So, it is strange that they're doing things different. Offense still been productive. I mean, especially early on in the season. I think we forget how good of a start everybody got off to. It's just been recently, along the last homestand, they're still winning games, but there's a lot of one-run games in there, and an offense that's just doing a little bit, just enough, to get by in a lot of cases. 2 one-run losses in Seattle, kind of illustrates that as well. But, thank goodness for Marcell Ozuna, Michael Harris, Ozzie Albies, because those guys have kind of carried the load offensively right now.
Yeah, and throw Travis d'Arnaud in there, especially on the homestand, where it seemed like he just might not make another out or might just challenge the home run record if they'd allowed him to play the rest of the season at Truist Park at the hot streak rate that he was on. But I'm glad you brought up the one-run losses. There were 2 of those in Seattle. One of obviously very frustrating to get walked off on a day in which you thought maybe we'd see the first Braves no-hitter in 30 years. Well, that didn't happen. And then you lost on top of that, a 3-2 loss the next day. And if you really look at the Braves' struggles, it doesn't help that it coincides with facing a very good Guardians pitching staff, especially the way that they were able to handle the Braves rotation-wise. The Mariners, I think, even better, obviously, than the Cleveland club that we saw. That when you face good pitching and your hitting's not quite where you want it to be, that can compound in different ways. But I went digging into the numbers across the league in totals for home runs. You may have seen this on social media. Slugging, team batting average, home runs, they're all down in 2024. So it's not just an Atlanta area phenomenon. Last year through 29 games, the Braves had 45 home runs, a total that ranked 4th in MLB as of May the 1st. This year, on May the 1st, the Baltimore Orioles were the Major League Baseball home run leader with, you guessed it, 45 home runs. The Braves, meanwhile, in their struggling offense, has matched the Orioles as of May the 1st with 157 runs scored. So go figure. Again, the Braves offense has been productive, even if it's looked a little bit different and hasn't featured as much long ball. So as you look at all of this, the Braves, they may be going through a bit of a power outage at the moment, something that should correct itself when we consider, Chris, the talent we're talking about, particularly Acuna, Olson, and Austin Riley.
Yeah, and I mean, if you go deeper and look at the expected stats, especially for Austin Riley and Matt Olson, you see guys that are hitting the ball hard that have been a little bit unlucky. Their expected slug is significantly higher, and for Olson, it's almost 100 points higher than what his output is. So, I'm not too worried about them. And you look at Acuna, he's obviously not hitting the ball as hard, not making as much contact. But I see a guy that's kind of pressing. Looks like he's pressing. He's trying to pull everything, and I
Mhm.
think that bears out into the numbers, and it's working against him right now. But as you mentioned, I mean, this team's too talented for these struggles to go on too long, and I just feel like at some point they're gonna get on track, and when they do, this offense is going to be scary because, as you just mentioned, they're already scoring runs. It's just not the way that we're accustomed to seeing. So that's a scary proposition probably for the rest of the NL East.
Yeah, it definitely is. I mean, Olson, who led the major leagues in runs batted in last year, plus Acuna and Austin Riley have combined to knock in just 39 of the Braves' 157 runs thus far. That trend is going to change. I'm glad you brought up some of the advanced stuff. Hard hit rates for Austin Riley and Matt Olson, very good. In fact, Olson's maybe the best on the club. Ronald Acuna Jr. is going to get there. I think he's being pitched very differently this year with a steady diet of fastballs in and up as much as they can, which I think is going to be an adjustment that he's going to have to make as he moves forward. And Ronald has shown he is capable of making adjustments. And again, this is not a talent question. It's not a skill question. I don't think it's a will question. They're going to figure out a way to do this. I took a look at the StatCast for indicators of the lineup as a whole, that in fact it is still a very good collection of hitters. Through 29 games a year ago, Atlanta had a weighted on base average of 338. This year, it's sitting at 339 through 29 games. And by the way, only the Dodgers have a better expected weighted on base average. That's 351 in 2024. That tells me the underlying skill, the quality of contact, it's still being made. So, again, at the expense of being rather repetitive, but no less confident, this group should run into better results, Chris.
Yeah, and I mean, I think the one big thing that jumps out about that is a sky high ground ball rate for this group to start with. They've hit the ball hard. They've hit a lot of it on the ground though, and as we all know, that's not the most productive way to go about it. We saw something similar a little bit last year, and as it started to raise, temperature started to go up, the ball started to fly a little bit better, and the offense really took off. As far as Acuna, I think you're hit on something too. I think the teams are trying to adjust the way they attack him. At the same time, I think he's having to adjust a little bit because he missed so much time in spring training. He come in with all these expectations, and he did not struggle at all last year
Wow.
for any extended period of time. I mean, you go back and look at him month by month; he was outstanding all the way through. So, he's still a young guy, and this is just one of those situations where the league has adjusted, and it's going to be up to him to do the same.
Yeah, it will be. And Ronald Acuna Jr., I don't know. I'd have to look at it on his batting game logs page or something, but not too many consecutive games that he went either without getting on base or without collecting a hit. Keep in mind, I mean, not only did he hit the 41 home runs, he also led Major League Baseball in hits. So this was a guy that was on base all the time. And he has been on base this year. It just has not been, with the by the virtue of as many hits as he was collecting last year, even when his ground ball rate was a little bit higher, because April was not a big home run month for him.
Mhm.
That, as you pointed out, Chris, started to pick up as the season wore on. Now, as this lineup looks for more power, the Braves rotation, the entire pitching staff really is doing some serious work for this club lately. Chris Sale and Reynaldo Lopez have been great additions. Max Fried's finally looking like Max Fried again, back-to-back terrific starts for him. 16 consecutive scoreless innings over those two starts, as a matter of fact. Charlie Morton has been a capable member of this rotation, coming off a couple of good starts as well. And Bryce Elder is now back as the number 5 in this group. Now that trio of Morton, Elder, and Fried is going to see action against the Dodgers' star-studded lineup this weekend. We'll talk more about that later, but it is going to be a big test for a pitching staff, both the rotation and the bullpen, that has been pitching extremely well, as the Braves have found the runs a little bit tougher to come by.
Yeah, and I mean, I think you got to be hats off to the rotation because once Strider went down, Freed was struggling a little bit. You really questioned, how are they going to be able to, keep the ship
Yep.
together as the way as far as that goes. Chris Sale's been outstanding.
Mhm.
He's been overshadowed a little bit, I think, by Reynaldo Lopez. and how good he has been. Charlie Morton stabilized a little bit after a couple of rough outings. Can't speak enough to this rotation, the way they've went out and took care of business of late, giving the team a lot of innings. And if you remember, that bullpen was worked extremely hard over the first couple of weeks. So I think it's pretty big, in a big picture sense, that they've been able to give that bullpen a little bit, over the last week or so.
Now, they have been able to rest that bullpen a lot bit, and I'm going to get to that in a second because this rotation is on track despite losing Spencer Strider. And look, a lot of clubs, including the Dodgers, have had to deal with major losses in their rotation, but it has allowed the bullpen to not be stuck covering massive amounts of innings because, Chris, as you just hit on it, the starters are out there giving 6 innings or more on a pretty good clip here over the past few weeks. In fact, this Braves bullpen, it might not surprise you at this point now that we've brought it up with some not so subtle foreshadowing. 3rd fewest innings pitched of any bullpen in baseball, all while turning in a 3.42 ERA. So they have done good work as well. Chris, we were concerned about this trend over the first couple of weeks of the season. That only heightened when Spencer Strider went out, but it has changed in the best possible way. Reynaldo Lopez, he's been a big surprise. Maybe that's the reason why people are kind of gravitating towards that. But for me, Chris Sale showing what he's shown over his first few starts in a Braves uniform, that has to be exactly what the Braves had in mind when they picked him up, not just from a quality standpoint, but they're also getting quantity in innings, and that makes a big difference.
Oh, without a doubt. I think that was the biggest question coming in, was whether, he was going to be more of a 5 and dive guy, which I know does not fit his personality. I know he does not want to be that way. And he's shown this first month. I mean, he's went out there. I think he's got 3 starts where he's went 7 innings. He's been around 100 pitches, in most of his starts. He's showing he's healthy, and I think he really, we know Chris Sale can put a chip on his shoulder, and I think he's ready to show everybody that he's back and he's passed all this injuries and is really effective again. So I think he's been a huge boost for this team. I think the biggest question, still going forward now that we're in May, the first month's behind us, is how they're going to manage innings for him and Reynaldo Lopez. And I know Sale's probably going to want to go out there every 5th day, but that is going to be something to watch them manage as we move forward, and for those 2 pitchers along with Charlie Morton, who's in his age 40 season.
Yeah, and I have talked about this a little bit because, yes, this success is very good to see, but we all know, what the toll is over the course of a long baseball season. Bryce Elder certainly learned that lesson last year. It was the thing he came to spring training talking about is, I got to make sure my preparation mentally and physically is there to get me through when you end up throwing more innings than you've ever thrown in your life. Now, that's not the case that everybody's dealing with, but just one example of how pitchers do have to be aware of that. Now, Brian Snitker has said before, we don't really believe in innings limits. From an injury standpoint, Chris, I don't really think that it does a whole lot because you can't avoid injury altogether. And starting pitchers, more so than perhaps anybody else in baseball, creatures of habit. They don't want to start every 5th day for 3 months, then start 6 days, 7 days, skip one, don't start for 10 days, come back. I feel like that throws them off incredibly. But what the Braves could do, perhaps, is what they have done in recent years, which is at least try to supplement with some of the other arms that they have in the minor leagues, whether that be Darius Vines, Alan Winans, guys we've already seen. Dylan Dodd was in that mix a year ago. On a more exciting level, perhaps A.J. Smith-Shawver, who we also got to look at in 2023, and eventually Hurston Waldrop. And, oh, yeah, our old friend Ian Anderson might be available in that second half as well. How would he factor into the plans? Because, the Braves aren't rehabbing him, so he can just sit in the minor leagues and be no part of the plan. This is a good thing when you've got quantity and you've got quality to mix in with all of that, as the Braves do look for ways to be creative and competitive in how they cover those innings, not just trying to give guys time off for the sake of giving them time off.
Yeah, and they've done a good job taking advantage of a bunch of early off days where they've been able to supplement, a guy in at the 5th spot, and then by virtue also give Lopez or Sale a day or 2 here or there. And I think that's how they manage it. I think it's an underrated thing. A lot of people talk about a 6-man rotation. The Braves don't typically do that, but they are very good at giving guys an extra day when they think they need them, especially early in the season. I think that could pay big dividends with guys like Sale and Lopez.
Yeah, it definitely could. Now let's take a look at this Los Angeles team, because every time the Braves and Dodgers meet, it has the feel of a postseason matchup, no matter what month it is. Dodgers 20-13, tops in the NL West. The Braves, meanwhile, check in at 20-9, the best record in baseball as of our recording here. LA already had enough firepower before they went out and added Shohei Ohtani to this mix. He's not pitching this year, which speaks to more of their pitching problems, but he's done plenty of hitting. That's one thing he's certainly capable of doing. 336, 7 homers, 14 doubles, 19 runs batted in, and 25 runs scored in 5 stolen bases as well. He's staying busy out there in 32 games. Elite level production that the Dodgers expected and will be paying for several decades. That's, of course, another story for another time. His teammate Mookie Betts has been even more productive, moved into the infield. The Dodgers shortstop now batting .377 with 6 homers, 25 runs knocked in, 8 steals, and 29 runs scored over the first month. Plus, you expect that from Mookie Betts at this point. That duo extremely impressive, and we haven't even gotten into Freddie Freeman, who's all of a sudden started to show that he's still Freddie Freeman, if there was any question. Will Smith has been very good, and the rest of that lineup collectively just ahead of Atlanta right now as most productive in the National League. So it should be interesting to see which version of the Braves shows up. As we talked about, could some of these Braves hitters find themselves at a very opportune time with a big series out at Dodger Stadium?
Yeah, and they're going to need it probably because, as you just mentioned, this is a very talented offensive club, top to bottom. They do a good job of mixing and matching at the bottom half of that lineup, and they're a tough out. I mean, we knew that. I mean, to me, the last 2 seasons should have ended with the Braves and the Dodgers in an NLCS, and we both know both of them ended up getting bounced in the division series inexplicably. But anytime these two teams play, it's got that playoff feel to it. I don't expect this to be any different, even though it is going to be really early in the season. Will be good to see Freddie Freeman again, as always. And I know he was in a little bit of a slump, but as you mentioned, he's still Freddie Freeman, and he's starting to heat up. And again, Mookie Betts has been amazing. I almost forgot that Shohei Ohtani was on that team, because just by looking at the numbers that Mookie Betts has put up, and he's doing it now as a shortstop. He would have won the MVP going away last year if it hadn't been for Ronald Acuna. And I think, it looks like he's already on a mission this season as well.
Yeah, I mean, he's picked up right where he left off last year. And the Dodgers, of course, they value that versatility, and they believed in it so much that they took what's a Gold Glove outfielder and moved him into their infield. So that's quite the adjustment to be able to make on the fly if you're a club and you're a player like Mookie Betts. It just speaks to that talent. Braves, meanwhile, they'll send Charlie Morton, Bryce Elder, then Max Fried to the mound. Dodgers counter with Gavin Stone, Tyler Glasnow, and James Paxton. Those are probable pitchers for this series. Both teams have been trying to get their rotation figured out. We talked a lot about Atlanta, but LA has been more of a mash unit. In addition to Ohtani not being slated to get any work off the mound for their rotation this year, Dodgers will get Walker Buehler back next week. I believe he comes in on Monday. He has missed all of this season, coming back from Tommy John. Dustin May had major surgery as well. He's on the shelf, slated to start throwing soon. Clayton Kershaw working in the bullpen. Bobby Miller has also been good for them, but now down. He's doing some throwing. When will he be back? That's questions the Dodgers are asking themselves and things that they've had to deal with. I say all that to say the Dodgers, they're finding ways to get it done, something the Braves know all too well when it comes to pitching injuries and patching together a rotation the past few years.
Yeah, and the Dodgers, a lot of their early exits have been a result of a bunch of pitching injuries. I mean, it's similar. It's amazing how similar both these teams have tracked over the last 2 seasons. So, everybody has to deal with it. It'll be interesting to see. It seems that they're hitting the Braves at the 4-5 mark in the rotation, and then Max Fried going on Sunday. It'll be interesting to see how guys like Bryce Elder and company navigate this lineup. They're going to have to keep the ball on the ground, keep the walks to a minimum. It's going to be a huge matchup, and it should be fun to watch.
It will be. It always seems to be. Last time the Braves were at Dodger Stadium, it was extremely fun to watch. I think Ronald Acuna Jr. might have just put his stamp on that MVP award and made it his own at that point. Could this be maybe the spark of something for Ronald Acuna Jr. and some other Braves hitters in another showdown in Los Angeles? That brings us to the end of another edition of BPTV. Make sure you hit that subscribe button right here on the Battery Power YouTube channel and turn on those notifications. You'll get an alert every time we drop a new episode. Thanks, as always, for riding along with us. He's Chris Willis. I'm Grant McCauley. We will catch you next time. And until then, so long, Braves Country.